Hello there and welcome back to the Science Sleepy Minds. Picture this. You're standing in a library that stretches infinitely in every direction. The shelves groan under the weight of countless books. But here is the strange part. Every book is already written. Every story that will ever be told, every sentence that will ever be uttered, every thought you will ever think is already printed on pages that exist somewhere in this impossible space. You reach for a volume labelled with tomorrow's date, and your fingers brush the spine. The words inside describe your breakfast, your commute, the conversation you will have with a stranger who does not yet feel real. And yet, according to some of the brightest minds in physics, that stranger is just as real as the person you spoke to yesterday. They exist, right now, always. Welcome to eternalism, the philosophical and scientific framework suggesting that your future is not approaching. It is already there, waiting like a patient friend who arrived at the restaurant hours before you did. You probably will not survive this idea with your comfortable sense of time intact, but that is perfectly fine. We are going to dismantle your intuitions together, brick by brick, until what remains is something stranger and perhaps more beautiful than the flowing river of time you've always imagined. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Drop a comment telling me where you're listening from and what time it is there, because as we are about to discover, that question is far more complicated than it sounds. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You've probably heard time described as a river. It flows, they say, from past to future, carrying you along like a leaf caught in the current. This metaphor feels intuitive because it matches your experience. Yesterday happened, today is happening, tomorrow will happen. Simple, clean, comforting. But what if the river is frozen solid? What if it was never flowing at all? And your sensation of movement is just an illusion created by a brain desperate to make sense of a reality it was never designed to comprehend. This is the unsettling welcome mat laid out by eternalism, sometimes called the block universe theory. In this view, the universe is not a movie playing frame by frame. It is the entire film reel existing all at once. Every frame, from the cosmic microwave background radiation echoing the Big Bang to the last dim flicker of a dying star trillions of years from now, exists simultaneously. Your birth exists, your death exists. The moment you first tasted chocolate exists just as vividly as the moment you will take your final breath. None of these moments is more real than the others. None is privileged with the special status of now. You might be thinking this sounds like the ramblings of someone who consumed questionable substances at a philosophy conference. Fair enough. But here is the thing. This idea is not the product of armchair speculation. It emerges directly from physics, specifically from the revolutionary work that Albert Einstein unleashed upon the world in 1905. Before Einstein, most people assumed that time was universal. If it was 3 o'clock in London, it was 3 o'clock everywhere in the universe. Sure, people in Tokyo might call it a different hour due to time zones, but the underlying tick of cosmic time was thought to be the same for everyone. Isaac Newton himself described time as absolute, true and mathematical, flowing equally without relation to anything external. It was the stage upon which the drama of the universe played out, unaffected by the actors or the scenery. Einstein obliterated this comfortable notion with the casual brilliance of someone solving a crossword puzzle on a Sunday morning. His special theory of relativity revealed that time is not absolute at all. It bends, it stretches, it depends on how fast you're moving relative to someone else. Two observers travelling at different velocities will disagree about which events are simultaneous, and here is the kicker. Neither of them is wrong. There is no cosmic referee to declare one perspective correct and the other mistaken. Imagine you're on a train moving close to the speed of light. which is admittedly a very expensive ticket, but bear with me. A friend stands on the platform watching you zoom past. According to you, 2 lightning bolts strike simultaneously, one at the front of the train, one at the back. You see them at the same instant, but your friend on the platform sees something different. From their perspective, the lightning bolt at the front struck first, followed by the one at the back. You both have accurate measurements. You both are telling the truth. And yet your truths flatly contradict each other. This is not a trick of perception or faulty equipment. This is reality behaving in ways that Newton never dreamed possible. The implication is staggering. If simultaneity is relative, if different observers cannot agree on what is happening right now across distances, then now itself loses its special status. Your present moment is not uniquely real. It is merely one slice of a much larger structure, a 4-dimensional block that contains all moments equally. Historians still argue whether Einstein himself fully embraced the philosophical implications of his work. He was a physicist first, more concerned with equations than metaphysics. But in a letter written to the family of his lifelong friend Michel Besso, shortly after Besso's death in 1955, Einstein offered a glimpse into his thinking. "Now he has departed from this strange world a little ahead of me," Einstein wrote. "That signifies nothing. For those of us who believe in physics, the distinction between past, present, and future is only a stubbornly persistent illusion. Only a stubbornly persistent illusion. Let those words settle into your bones as you sink deeper into your pillow. The man who reshaped our understanding of the universe considered your sense of time's passage to be nothing more than a trick of consciousness, a story your brain tells to navigate a reality far stranger than daily experience suggests. Here is a quirky tidbit to tuck away. The equations of physics, with very few exceptions, work equally well whether time runs forward or backward. If you filmed a simple interaction between particles and played the footage in reverse, the physics would still be valid. There is nothing in the fundamental laws that prefers one direction over the other. The arrow of time, that sense that yesterday is fundamentally different from tomorrow, is not built into the basic machinery of the cosmos. It emerges from something else entirely, something we will explore later as you drift through this journey. But for now, let yourself sit with the strangeness. You exist in a universe where the future is not a mystery waiting to unfold. It is a destination that already exists, as fixed and permanent as your memories of childhood. The party you might attend next month is already happening in some sense. The words you will speak are already spoken. The choices you will make are already made, embedded in the crystalline structure of spacetime like insects preserved in amber. Does this mean you're trapped? Does it mean your decisions are meaningless, your struggles futile? We will wrestle with those questions soon enough. For now, simply breathe and notice the sensation of this moment passing into the next. Notice how real that transition feels, how undeniable the flow seems. And then remind yourself, the river is frozen. It has always been frozen. You're not moving through time. You are a pattern woven into its fabric, eternal and unchanging, reading these words in a moment that will never cease to exist. The library stretches around you, infinite and complete. Every book already written, every page already filled, and somewhere on those shelves, a version of you is just beginning to understand what that means. The year is 1905, and a 26-year-old patent clerk in Bern, Switzerland, is about to commit intellectual arson on 3 centuries of physics. You find yourself in that cramped office, watching Albert Einstein scratch equations into a notebook while the Swiss Alps loom outside the window, indifferent to the revolution happening at a cluttered desk. He is not yet famous. His hair is not yet wild. He's just a young man with an obsession, turning over a single question that has haunted him since adolescence. What would it look like to ride alongside a beam of light? This deceptively simple thought experiment led Einstein to conclusions that would shatter the Newtonian worldview like a teacup dropped on marble. Special relativity emerged not from complex laboratory equipment or billion-dollar particle accelerators, but from the careful, almost playful application of logic to a universe that refused to behave sensibly. You have heard the basics before, perhaps in a high school classroom where the teacher drew diagrams on the board and you quietly wondered when you would ever use this information. But tonight, as sleep creeps closer, let the implications truly sink in. Einstein discovered that the speed of a light is constant for all observers, regardless of how fast they are moving. This sounds innocent enough until you trace the consequences. If light travels at the same speed whether you're standing still or hurtling through space at half its velocity, something else must give. That something is time itself. Time slows down for objects in motion relative to a stationary observer. This is not metaphor or approximation, it is measurable, testable fact. Atomic clocks flown on airplanes tick slightly slower than identical clocks left on the ground. The difference is minuscule at everyday speeds, but it is real. Satellites in orbit must account for relativistic time dilation, or your GPS would send you into lakes with alarming regularity. Now here is where the frozen river begins to crystallize. If time passes at different rates for different observers, depending on their relative motion, then the concept of a universal now dissolves like morning fog. You and a friend travelling at different velocities cannot agree on which events are simultaneous across distances. What is happening right now on a planet 50 light-years away? The question has no single answer. It depends entirely on how you are moving. Imagine a spaceship travelling away from Earth at 90% the speed of light. An astronaut on board looks back at our planet and tries to determine what is happening there now. According to a reference frame, she might calculate that it is currently the year 2015 on Earth. But a different astronaut on a spaceship travelling toward Earth at the same speed would calculate that it is 2035. Both are correct within their own reference frames. Neither is privileged, neither is wrong. This is the relativity of simultaneity, and it pulls the rug out from under presentism, the intuitive belief that only the present moment is real. If different observers cannot even agree on what the present moment contains, how can we claim it has special ontological status? How can we say that now exists while the past has vanished and the future has not yet arrived? Einstein's former professor, Hermann Minkowski, took these ideas and forged them into a geometric framework that still underpins modern physics. In 1908, Minkowski delivered a lecture that began with words so dramatic they sound like the opening of a Gothic novel. Henceforth space by itself, and time by itself, are doomed to fade away into mere shadows, he declared, and only a kind of union of the two will preserve an independent reality. That union is spacetime, a four-dimensional manifold in which every event occupies a specific location defined by 3 spatial coordinates and 1 temporal coordinate. You're not moving through time, you occupy a particular region of spacetime, a world line tracing your existence from birth to death. That world line already exists in its entirety, as fixed as the path of a river carved into stone. You're simply experiencing it from within, like a character in a novel who believes they are making choices but whose dialogue was written long before the reader opened the book. Scholars still debate whether Minkowski intended his geometric framework to carry such heavy, metaphysical weight, or whether he viewed it primarily as a mathematical convenience. His untimely death from appendicitis in 1909 at the age of 44 robbed us of the chance to hear him elaborate on these profound implications. But the structure he bequeathed to physics suggests a universe in which time is not fundamentally different from space, merely another dimension, another axis on which existence is plotted. Consider what this means for your sense of the present as uniquely real. In three-dimensional space, you have no trouble accepting that distant locations exist even when you are not there. Paris exists while you lie in bed. The bottom of the ocean exists while you breathe air. You do not believe that places spring into existence as you approach them or vanish when you leave. They are simply elsewhere, occupying different coordinates in the spatial dimensions. Minkowski spacetime suggests the same is true for moments in time. The dinosaurs exist, not existed but exist, at coordinates roughly 66 million years in the past direction along the temporal axis. Your great-grandchildren exist at coordinates some distance in the future direction. These are not figures of speech. They are the logical consequences of treating time as a genuine dimension, rather than a mysterious flow carrying us from moment to moment. Here is a charming piece of scientific trivia that rarely makes it into textbooks. When Einstein first encountered Minkowski's geometric interpretation, he was reportedly dismissive, calling it superfluous learnedness. The student had outgrown the teacher, or so Einstein thought, but he later changed his mind dramatically. When developing general relativity over the following decade, Einstein found Minkowski's framework not just useful but essential. The geometry of space-time became the very language in which gravity speaks. You might protest that this is all very well for physicists scribbling on chalkboards, but surely your lived experience contradicts it. You remember the past but not the future. You can influence what comes next but not what came before. The asymmetry feels built into the fabric of reality, not merely into your perception. And you're right to notice this. The asymmetry is real, but its source is not where you might expect. It does not arise from the fundamental nature of time itself, but from something else entirely. Something related to disorder, probability, and the peculiar conditions that existed at the very beginning of our universe. We will visit that mystery soon, exploring why the arrow of time points in one direction, even though the underlying physics makes no such demand. For now, let the frozen river image settle deeper into your drowsy mind. Einstein showed us that the flow of time is observer-dependent, that simultaneity is relative, that your now is no more privileged than any other moment in the vast expanse of space-time. Minkowski gave us the geometry to visualize this, a four-dimensional block in which all of history, past, present, and future, exists with equal reality. You're not travelling through time, you're embedded in it, a pattern of matter and energy occupying a specific region of the cosmic tapestry. The pages of the book are not turning. They are all there, bound together, waiting to be read by a consciousness that experiences them sequentially, but does not cause them to exist. The clock on your wall ticks, and you hear each second as if it were arriving fresh from somewhere beyond the horizon. But the ticks are already there. They have always been there, and in some profound sense they always will be. You're having a perfectly ordinary morning. Sunlight streams through the window, coffee steams in your favourite mug, and your brain confidently reports that right now is happening. This moment, this breath, this heartbeat, all of it feels undeniably present, sharp-edged with immediacy. The past is a fading memory. The future is a blank canvas. And yet, if the physicists are correct, your brain is lying to you with the serene confidence of a pathological fabulist. The stubborn persistence of memory, to borrow Einstein's phrase, creates a felt experience of time that physics cannot quite accommodate. You remember yesterday but not tomorrow. You can replay conversations in your mind, cringe at old embarrassments, smile at forgotten joys, but only in the backward direction. The future remains opaque, a fog bank refusing to lift no matter how hard you squint. This asymmetry of memory is so fundamental to your existence that it feels like it must reflect some deep truth about reality. Surely time really does flow from past to future, carrying you along like that leaf in the river we mentioned earlier. Surely the present moment really is special, a knife edge of existence separating what was from what will be. But here is the uncomfortable truth your brain does not want you to know. The sensation of temporal flow is a construction, an elaborate story manufactured by neural machinery that evolved not to perceive reality accurately but to keep you alive long enough to reproduce. Your brain is not a truth-seeking device. It is a survival machine, and survival required certain useful illusions about the nature of time. Consider what neuroscience has revealed about the so-called present moment. When you believe you're experiencing now, you're actually experiencing the past, approximately 80 milliseconds in the past, to be somewhat precise about an inherently fuzzy phenomenon. Your brain requires time to process sensory information, integrate it into a coherent picture, and present that picture to your conscious awareness. By the time you experience anything, it has already happened. This delay creates fascinating problems for the brain to solve. When you watch someone's lips move while they speak, the visual and auditory information travels different distances and takes different amounts of time to process. Light reaches your eyes almost instantaneously, but sound ambles along at a comparatively leisurely 340 meters per second. Your brain could present these asynchronously, showing you lips moving before you hear words, like a badly dubbed movie. But that would be confusing and potentially dangerous, so your brain waits, collecting information and weaving it into a seamless narrative that feels like a single unified moment. The magician's craft exploits exactly these processing gaps. When a skilled illusionist makes a coin disappear, they are not actually violating physics. They are manipulating your brain's assumptions about temporal continuity. Your neural machinery interpolates between moments, fills in gaps, and constructs a story that feels complete, but is riddled with edits and fabrications you never notice. Here is a delightful quirk discovered by researchers studying temporal perception. Your brain sometimes reorders events to make them seem causally sensible, even when the actual order was different. In certain experimental setups, people will report that event A caused event B even when B actually occurred first. The brain decides that a particular causal story makes more sense and simply rewrites history to accommodate it. You are an unreliable narrator of your own experience, and you never even notice the manuscript changes. Historians of neuroscience still argue whether consciousness is fundamentally a temporal phenomenon, something that requires the passage of time to exist, or whether it could, in principle, emerge from a static structure that merely contains the information of sequential experiences. This question has profound implications for eternalism. If the block universe is real, and all moments exist simultaneously, then every moment of consciousness exists simultaneously as well. Your experience of reading these words is not flickering in and out of existence as now passes through it. It simply is, frozen in place, a permanent feature of the space-time block. Some philosophers find this deeply troubling. Daniel Dennett, the cognitive scientist and philosopher, has argued that consciousness is essentially a narrative process, something that necessarily unfolds over time. If this is true, then the block universe poses a puzzle. How can something that requires unfolding exist in a structure where nothing ever unfolds? One possible answer is that the block universe contains all the temporal relationships between mental states, even though it does not contain any actual flowing. Your memory of breakfast exists in a causal relationship with your experience of breakfast. One came before the other in the temporal dimension, just as your feet are below your head in the spatial dimension. The relationships are preserved. The structure is intact. Only the flow is missing, and perhaps the flow was never necessary for consciousness to exist in the first place. Think of it this way. A movie on a DVD contains every frame of the film simultaneously, encoded in the pits and lands of the disc's surface. When you play the movie, the frames are read sequentially, creating the illusion of motion and change. but the movie exists complete even when no one is playing it. The story is still there. The characters still have their arcs. The ending already exists at the same moment as the beginning. Perhaps you're like a character in that movie, experiencing your scenes sequentially, but existing complete. Your consciousness is embedded in the structure of your world line, each moment of awareness as permanent as a frame frozen on film. You feel like you are moving through the story because that is how consciousness experiences temporally extended structures. But the structure itself is static. The pages of your life are already printed. This raises a haunting question. If every moment of your existence is equally real, if your childhood and your old age coexist in the same timeless structure, then in what sense have you lost anything to the past? Your 5th birthday party is not gone. It exists at a particular location in space-time, as real and vivid as the moment you're experiencing now. The people you have lost to death are not erased. They exist in the regions of space-time they occupied during their lives as permanent as stars. We will return to these consolations later, when sleep draws closer and comfort becomes more important than rigor. For now, simply notice the strangeness of your own consciousness, the elaborate machinery constructing your sense of now, the 80 millisecond delay that separates experience from reality, the rewrites and interpolations that make your personal narrative feel seamless. Your brain insists that time flows. Physics insists that it does not. Somewhere between these competing claims lies the mystery of consciousness itself, the hard problem that has tormented philosophers for centuries and shows no sign of yielding to easy solutions. But you do not need to solve the mystery tonight. You only need to let it wash over you, strange and soothing, as the illusion of the present moment carries you gently towards sleep. You're floating now, or at least it feels that way, suspended in the conceptual space where physics becomes geometry and time loses its special status. Welcome to Minkowski spacetime, where the universe reveals itself not as a story unfolding, but as a sculpture already complete, a 4-dimensional loaf of cosmic bread in which every moment is a slice waiting to be examined. This is not a metaphor, though it often gets treated as one. Physicists genuinely use the language of geometry to describe the relationship between space and time, and the picture they paint has profound implications for your place in reality. You're not a traveller moving through time, you're a pattern embedded in space-time, a world line tracing a particular path through the block. Your birth and your death are both present in this structure, separated by distance in the temporal direction, just as your left hand and right hand are separated by distance in the spatial direction. To visualize this, imagine a simple space-time diagram. You have surely seen one, even if you do not remember, a vertical axis representing time and a horizontal axis representing space. Your world line is a curve on this diagram, rising upward as you age, zigging and zagging as you move through space. If you sit perfectly still for an hour, your world line is a straight vertical line. You're moving through time but not through space. If you walk across the room, your world line tilts, acquiring a spatial component as well as a temporal one. Now comes the beautiful strangeness. In special relativity, the geometry of space-time is not Euclidean. It does not follow the rules you learned in high school about parallel lines and triangles and the Pythagorean theorem. Instead, space-time follows Minkowski geometry, a mathematical structure that treats time differently from space, while still weaving them into a unified whole. The key concept is the space-time interval, a quantity that remains constant for all observers, regardless of their relative motion. Remember how Einstein showed that time dilates and lengths contract depending on how fast you're moving? These changes are not arbitrary. They conspire together to preserve the space-time interval, a kind of cosmic invariant that all observers agree upon. Here is a quirky way to think about it. When you sit still, you are moving entirely through time and not at all through space. Your velocity through time is maximized. But when you start moving through space, some of your motion gets redirected. You move less through time and more through space. This is why moving clocks run slow. They are literally travelling through less time because they are redirecting some of their motion into the spatial dimensions. Everything in the universe, including you, is always moving through space-time at the speed of light. When you're stationary in space, all of that motion is directed through time. When you move through space, some of that motion is redirected, and your passage through time slows down accordingly. At the extreme, a photon travelling at the speed of light through space has no motion left over for time. For a photon, time does not pass at all. It exists in a kind of eternal now, leaving its source and arriving at its destination in the same instant from its own perspective, even if millions of years pass for external observers. Scholars still debate whether this geometric interpretation of relativity should be taken as literal ontology or merely as a useful mathematical framework. Some physicists argue that space-time is genuinely a four-dimensional manifold with all moments equally real. Others contend that the geometry is simply a tool for calculation, making no claims about what ultimately exists. The equations work equally well either way, which is frustrating for anyone hoping physics would settle the philosophical question definitively. But let us assume, for this sleepy journey, that the geometric interpretation is correct. What would that mean for the universe you inhabit? First, it would mean that the Big Bang is not an event that happened long ago. It is an event that exists at a particular location in the space-time block, roughly 13.8 billion years in the past direction from where you currently sit. The cosmic microwave background radiation, that faint glow left over from the early universe, originates from coordinates in space-time that are just as real as the coordinates you occupy now. Second, it would mean that the future is equally real. The heat death of the universe, that distant epoch when entropy reaches its maximum and all useful energy is exhausted, exists at coordinates far in the future direction. It has not happened yet from your perspective, but the word yet loses its meaning in a block universe. It simply exists elsewhere in the block. Third, and most intimately, it would mean that your entire life, every joy, every sorrow, every moment of boredom and excitement and love and fear, exists as a permanent structure woven into the fabric of reality. Nothing is truly lost because nothing can leave the block. Your happiest memories are not fading photographs, but eternal monuments, fixed in their space-time coordinates forever. This might sound comforting or terrifying depending on your disposition. The permanence of joy is lovely, but the permanence of suffering is disturbing. Every moment of pain you have ever experienced remains in the block, frozen in place, never healing because there is no flow of time to carry healing along. We will grapple with these uncomfortable implications later. For now, simply hold the picture in your mind, a cosmic loaf, sliced infinitely thin, each slice a moment containing the entire spatial universe at that instant. You exist across many slices. You are not a point but a worm, a four-dimensional tube stretching from birth to death, widening where you gain weight and narrowing where you lose it, branching where your hair grows and merging where it falls out. Your friends and family are similar tubes, intertwining with yours where your lives intersect, diverging where they do not. The whole structure sits complete, timeless, eternal. The loaf will never rise further. The bread will never stale. It simply is, containing everything that has ever happened or will ever happen, waiting to be contemplated by minds embedded within it, who cannot help but experience their slice of existence as uniquely present. Minkowski gave us this vision over a century ago. We have been struggling to understand its implications ever since. You settle deeper into the mattress, the geometric vision of space-time still flickering behind your eyelids. But not everyone accepts this frozen tableau. Some philosophers and physicists push back, proposing alternatives that might rescue your intuitive sense that the future is genuinely open, unwritten, waiting for you to author it through your choices. Welcome to the growing block universe, a compromise position that tries to have it both ways. In this view, the past is fixed and real. Those dinosaurs we mentioned earlier exist in their spacetime coordinates, immutable and eternal. But the future does not exist yet. The block is growing, adding new slices as time passes, crystallizing possibilities into actualities moment by moment. You stand on the edge of reality, the present moment serving as the surface where new existence is constantly being created. This might sound more comforting than strict eternalism. At least your future remains unwritten. At least your choices still matter, selecting among genuine possibilities rather than merely discovering what was always fated to occur. But the growing block has problems of its own, problems that emerge when you start asking pointed questions. Chief among these is the relativity of simultaneity we discussed earlier. If different observers cannot agree on what events are simultaneous, then they cannot agree on where the edge of the growing block is located. Your present moment, the surface where reality is being created, differs from the present moment of someone moving relative to you. Whose edge is real? Whose growth counts? In strict eternalism, this is not a problem because no edge exists. All moments are equally real, and the disagreement about simultaneity is simply a disagreement about how to slice the block, like disagreeing about whether to cut a loaf of bread straight or at an angle. But in the growing block view, the edge has metaphysical significance. It separates what exists from what does not yet exist. The relativity of simultaneity makes this edge incoherent. Some philosophers have proposed fixes, arguing that there might be a preferred reference frame that picks out the true present moment, even though physics cannot detect it. This is technically possible, but strikes many as ad hoc, inventing invisible structure to save an intuition that physics has already undermined. Historians of philosophy still argue whether such moves are legitimate theoretical positing or mere wishful thinking dressed up in technical language. The shrinking block is a more exotic proposal, suggesting that perhaps reality is being destroyed rather than created. The future exists, the present exists, but the past is vanishing, disappearing behind you like footprints washed away by waves. This view has the virtue of being genuinely novel, but the drawback of conflicting with literally everything we think we know about memory, records, and evidence. The past seems to leave traces in the present. Fossils, photographs, light from distant stars. And if the past were vanishing, these traces would be vanishing too. Then there is presentism, the view we will examine more closely later, which denies that either past or future exists. Only the present moment is real. The dinosaurs do not exist at their space-time coordinates because those coordinates do not exist. The future does not exist because it has not happened yet. Only the knife edge of now has genuine being. Presentism aligns wonderfully with intuition, but collides violently with relativity. If the present moment is the only thing that exists, and different observers disagree about what the present moment contains, then either some observers are wrong about fundamental reality, or the universe contains multiple incompatible present moments, each equally real and equally exclusive. Neither option is particularly satisfying. Here is a fun detail from the history of this debate. The philosopher Arthur Prior, one of the most important advocates for tense time and the unreality of the future, once suggested that the problem of future contingents, whether statements about the future can be true or false, was the most important unsolved problem in all of philosophy. He traced the question back to Aristotle, who worried about whether it was already true that there would be a sea battle tomorrow. If it is true, Aristotle feared, then the sea battle is necessary and the admirals have no choice. If it is neither true nor false, then logic itself seems to break down. 24 centuries later, we still do not have a consensus answer. The growing block is one attempt to resolve the puzzle, asserting that statements about the past can be true or false, but statements about the future lack truth values because the future does not yet exist. But this solution has its own difficulties, and the debate continues in philosophy departments around the world. You might wonder why any of this matters. Whether the future exists or not, you still have to live your life, make your choices, stumble through your days with the same uncertainty you have always felt. True enough. But the metaphysical picture can shape how you relate to your existence, how you feel about mortality, how you understand your place in the cosmic story. If eternalism is correct, you're not a brief flash of existence in an infinite void. You're a permanent feature of reality, a shape carved into the block that will never erode. Your life is not a flame that gutters out. It is a sculpture that remains forever, even after you stop experiencing new moments. If the growing block is correct, you are a wavefront of creation, surfing the edge of reality as it expands into the void. Your choices are genuinely creative, adding new existence to a universe that was incomplete before you acted. If presentism is correct, you are the most real thing there is, existing fully in the only moment that has being, surrounded by ghosts of the past and phantoms of the future that are nothing more than memories and expectations. Each picture has its consolations and its terrors. Each shapes the story you tell yourself about what it means to be alive. And perhaps, in the end, the truth is stranger than any of these options, emerging from physics we have not yet discovered, waiting in the future that may or may not already exist. For now, let the competing visions swirl together, mixing like cream in coffee, refusing to settle into a single coherent picture. The uncertainty is part of the journey. The questions matter more than the answers, and sleep is approaching, indifferent to metaphysics, real in the only way that ultimately matters. A new whisper enters the darkness behind your eyelids, not the voice of philosophers debating abstract existence, but the hiss of something more fundamental. Entropy, the universe's patient accountant, tallying disorder, always finding the total growing. And in that ceaseless growth lies one of the deepest mysteries about time itself. Why does it have a direction at all? You have probably noticed that eggs break but do not unbreak. Coffee cools but does not spontaneously heat up. Your room tends toward mess rather than order, and no amount of waiting will cause scattered socks to fold themselves. These are not just inconveniences of daily life. They are manifestations of the second law of thermodynamics, one of the most fundamental principles in all of physics. The second law states that the total entropy of an isolated system never decreases over time. Entropy is often glossed as disorder, though this is a simplification that would make a physicist wince. More precisely, entropy measures the number of microscopic arrangements that could produce a given macroscopic state. A neatly organized room has low entropy because there are few ways to arrange the objects while keeping everything tidy. A messy room has high entropy because there are countless ways to scatter items randomly. Here is the key insight. The fundamental laws of physics are time-symmetric. Newton's laws, Einstein's equations, the Schrödinger equation of quantum mechanics, all of them work equally well whether time runs forward or backward. If you filmed 2 billiard balls colliding and played the footage in reverse, the reversed collision would obey exactly the same laws as the original. There is nothing in the basic machinery of physics that prefers one temporal direction over the other, and yet entropy increases only toward the future. The arrow of time points one way, from order to disorder, from eggs intact to eggs scrambled, from hot coffee to lukewarm disappointment. How can time-symmetric laws produce time-asymmetric behavior? The answer, as best as physicists can determine, lies in initial conditions. The universe began in an extraordinarily low entropy state. The Big Bang was hot and dense, but also remarkably uniform and organised compared to what it would become. Given this special starting point, the only direction entropy can go is up. The arrow of time is not built into the laws, but into the boundary conditions. We are moving away from that special past, sliding down the entropy gradient toward a future of increasing disorder. This is Ludwig Boltzmann's great insight, developed in the late 19th century and still foundational today. Boltzmann realized that the second law is not strictly a law at all, but rather an overwhelming statistical probability. It is not impossible for entropy to decrease spontaneously. It is merely so unlikely that you would have to wait unfathomable ages to observe it happen. A shattered egg could, in principle, reassemble itself as all the molecules happen to move in just the right directions. But the probability of this occurring is so vanishingly small that it might as well be zero. Scholars still debate whether this statistical explanation is fully satisfying. Why did the universe begin in such a low entropy state? What set the initial conditions so precisely? The physicist Roger Penrose has argued that the Big Bang's low entropy is deeply mysterious and may require new physics to explain. Others suggest that our universe might be one of many, with different regions having different initial conditions, and we naturally find ourselves in a region compatible with our existence, a form of anthropic reasoning that some find illuminating and others find evasive. Here is a quirky fact that rarely makes it into popular accounts. Boltzmann himself suffered greatly from depression and eventually took his own life in 1906, possibly unable to bear the controversy his ideas generated during his lifetime. His statistical approach to thermodynamics was resisted by many prominent physicists who found the idea of reducing physics to probability distasteful. Today, his work is celebrated as foundational, and his tombstone bears the famous equation relating entropy to probability. He never lived to see his vindication. The arrow of time has profound implications for the block universe. If all moments exist equally in the space-time block, then high entropy states and low entropy states both exist with equal reality. The Big Bang exists at one end of the block, and the heat death of the universe exists at the other. The arrow of time is not a feature of the block itself, but emerges from the perspective of embedded observers who can only form memories in the direction of increasing entropy. This is crucial. You remember the past and not the future, because memory formation requires entropy increase. Recording information, whether in neurons or notebooks, is a thermodynamic process that produces waste heat and increases disorder. You can only do this in the direction of the entropy gradient, which means you can only form memories of events in the lower entropy direction, what we call the past. If you were somehow an observer embedded in a region of decreasing entropy, your memories would work differently. You would remember what we call the future and anticipate what we call the past. Your sense of temporal direction would be reversed, but you would still feel like time was flowing forward from memory toward anticipation, exactly as you feel now. The arrow of time is not an objective feature of reality, but a consequence of how embedded observers interact with the entropy gradient. This might explain why your brain so stubbornly insists that time flows. The sensation is not a perception of fundamental reality, but a reflection of thermodynamic necessity. Consciousness requires entropy increase. Memory requires entropy increase. The very existence of ordered structures like brains and bodies requires continuous entropy production. You're a dissipative structure, a pattern maintained far from equilibrium by constantly dumping entropy into your environment. The flow of time is how this process feels from the inside. As you drift towards sleep, your metabolism continues its quiet work, breaking down sugars, releasing heat, increasing the entropy of your bedroom and ultimately of the universe. Even in rest, you're a small engine of disorder, contributing your modest share to the cosmic tide. The arrow of time runs through you, literally, carried in every breath and heartbeat. The universe is winding down toward its heat death, that distant epoch when entropy reaches its maximum and nothing interesting can happen anymore. But that end is not approaching. Remember, if eternalism is correct, it already exists, has always existed, will always exist. The heat death is simply elsewhere in the block, separated from you by coordinates rather than by time that has yet to pass. The whisper of entropy fades as you sink deeper. The arrow points on, the accounting continues. Just when you thought you were settling into the block universe, something stirs in the quantum depths. A reminder that reality resists simple pictures. Quantum mechanics, that bewildering foundation of modern physics, refuses to play nice with eternalism. The dice of the quantum world introduce uncertainties that complicate any tidy vision of a predetermined future. You have heard the famous soundbite, "God does not play dice with the universe." Einstein said it, reportedly expressing his discomfort with the probabilistic nature of quantum mechanics. He spent much of his later life trying to show that quantum randomness must conceal some deeper deterministic reality, hidden variables that would restore the clockwork cosmos. He died without succeeding. The universe, it seems, does play dice, or at least it looks like it does from our perspective inside the game. Here is the standard picture, stripped to essentials. A quantum particle does not have definite properties until it is measured. Before measurement, it exists in a superposition, a ghostly combination of all possible states weighted by probability amplitudes. When you measure the particle, the superposition collapses into a single definite outcome. The electron that could have been spin up or spin down becomes definitely spin up, and the alternative vanishes, or seems to vanish. But what does this mean for the block universe? If the future already exists, then the measurement outcome already exists too. The electron was always going to be spin up. You just did not know it until you looked. Measurement does not collapse anything. It merely reveals what was predetermined all along. This interpretation is called superdeterminism, and it makes many physicists uncomfortable. It suggests that the entire history of the universe, including every measurement you will ever make, was fixed at the Big Bang. Your decision to measure spin in this direction rather than that direction was not really a decision. It was the inevitable unfolding of initial conditions. Free will disappears not because the future exists, but because even your choices are determined by the past. But there are other interpretations, other ways to fit quantum mechanics into a picture of reality. The many worlds interpretation, proposed by Hugh Everett in 1957, suggests that measurement does not collapse the superposition. Instead, the universe splits, branching into multiple copies that each contain one possible outcome. In this view, the block universe is not a single loaf, but a vast branching tree, with new branches constantly budding at every quantum event. If many worlds is correct, then every version of the future exists. Not just the one you will experience, but all the alternatives, all the roads not taken, all the outcomes that seemed possible before measurements settle the question. You exist in countless copies across the branching structure, each version convinced of the reality of their particular branch, each unaware of the others except as theoretical possibilities discussed in physics books. Scholars still argue furiously about which interpretation is correct. Some advocate for pilot wave theory, which restores determinism by positing hidden variables that guide particles along definite trajectories, with randomness arising only from our ignorance of the initial conditions. Others embrace objective collapse theories, which modify quantum mechanics to include a genuine physical mechanism for superposition collapse. Still others argue that the entire debate is misguided, that quantum mechanics is merely a tool for prediction, and cannot be interpreted as a picture of underlying reality. Here's a delightful piece of physics trivia. The famous thought experiment known as Schrödinger's cat was not intended to suggest that cats can actually be both alive and dead simultaneously. Erwin Schrödinger proposed it in 1935 as a critique of the Copenhagen interpretation, trying to show by reductio ad absurdum that something was wrong with the standard picture. He found the idea of a superposed cat ridiculous. Today, his name is forever attached to an idea he meant to mock. What does all this mean for your sense of time and fate? If superdeterminism is true, then the block universe contains a single fixed future. And quantum randomness is an illusion born of ignorance. If many worlds is true, then the block is a branching structure containing all possible futures, and you will experience only one branch while your copies experience others. If objective collapse is true, then genuine randomness enters reality at the quantum level, and the future might not be fully determined, though this seems to conflict with the spirit of eternalism. Perhaps the deepest lesson is humility. The foundations of physics remain contested. The nature of quantum reality is not settled. The relationship between quantum mechanics and spacetime is one of the great open problems in modern science, waiting for some future Einstein to resolve. We do not know whether the future exists, whether it is single or branching, whether quantum events are truly random or merely appear so. But you do not need certainty to drift towards sleep. The mystery itself can be soothing, a reminder that reality is grander and stranger than any human mind can fully grasp. The quantum dice rattle in the darkness, landing on outcomes that may or may not have been predetermined. You lie in your bed, a macroscopic pattern emerging from trillions of quantum events, somehow coherent, somehow conscious, somehow experiencing the passage of moments that physics suggests may not truly pass. The wave function of your drowsiness is collapsing, or branching, or revealing its predetermined shape. Whichever story is true, sleep is approaching. The quantum whispers fade into the hum of your fan, and the block universe holds you gently in its timeless embrace. Somewhere behind your forehead, a miracle of wetware is constructing your sense of now. Approximately 100 billion neurons are firing in patterns so complex that no computer on Earth can fully simulate them, and somehow from this electrochemical storm emerges the felt experience of being present in this moment. The brain's elaborate time illusion is perhaps its greatest magic trick, so seamless that you never notice the wires and trapdoors. You've already heard that you're living in the past, that 80-millisecond delay between events and awareness. But the construction of temporal experience goes much deeper than simple processing lag. Your brain is constantly predicting, interpolating, retroactively editing, and outright confabulating to create the smooth stream of consciousness you mistake for direct perception. Consider the phenomenon of backward masking. If a visual stimulus is presented very briefly, say 10 milliseconds, and is then immediately followed by a second stimulus, you may fail to perceive the first stimulus at all. It is not that you see it and then forget it. You never become conscious of it in the first place. The second stimulus somehow reaches back in time to prevent the first from entering awareness. Of course, nothing actually reaches back in time. What happens is that your brain takes some time to process stimuli into conscious experience, and during that processing window, later information can influence how earlier information is interpreted. The brain is not a passive receiver of sensory data, but an active constructor of reality, and it builds its constructions using information from a wider temporal window than you might expect. This is why eyewitness testimony is so unreliable. Your brain is not recording events like a video camera. It is constructing a narrative that makes sense given everything it knows, including information acquired after the event. If someone tells you that the getaway car was blue, your memory might shift to accommodate this suggestion, even if the car was actually green. You're not lying when you report a blue car, You genuinely remember blue, but your memory has been contaminated by later information without your knowledge or consent. Here is a fascinating finding from neuroscience research. People who experience damage to certain brain regions can develop temporal processing disorders that reveal just how much construction goes into normal time perception. Some patients experience chronostasis, a phenomenon where time seems to stop, the classic example being the stopped clock illusion, where a glance at a clock seems to make the second hand freeze momentarily before resuming its movement. This happens because your brain needs time to process the visual information, and it backfills the gap with an assumption that whatever you see now was already there. Other patients develop more dramatic symptoms. Damage to the cerebellum can disrupt timing in the range of milliseconds, affecting motor coordination and the ability to perceive rhythm. Damage to the basal ganglia can affect timing in the range of seconds, interfering with the ability to estimate durations or anticipate future events. The brain does not have a single clock. It has multiple timing systems operating at different scales, and damage to any of them can fragment your sense of temporal experience. Researchers still debate the neural basis of the specious present, that window of roughly 2 to 3 seconds during which events feel simultaneous, or at least closely connected. William James coined the term in 1890, describing it as the short duration of which we are immediately and incessantly sensible. Within this window, you perceive a unified now. Beyond it, events feel like they belong to the past. The specious present has interesting implications for the block universe. If all moments exist equally, then your sense of now is not picking out a metaphysically privileged instant, but merely reflecting the structure of your neural processing. The approximately 3-second window is a feature of your brain, not of reality. Different creatures with different brains might have different specious presents. A hummingbird might experience a much shorter now, while a whale might experience a longer one. Here is a quirky detail from the research literature. Meditation practitioners often report changes in their experience of time, including a sense that the present moment expands or becomes more vivid. Brain imaging studies suggest that meditation can alter activity in regions associated with time perception, including the insular cortex and the anterior cingulate cortex. Whether this represents a more accurate perception of timeless reality or merely a different cognitive construction is philosophically contested. Your brain is also responsible for the sensation that time flows, that you're moving through moments rather than simply existing within them. This sensation is so powerful that it feels undeniable, but neuroscience offers reasons to doubt its veridicality. The brain creates the sense of flow by comparing current states with memories of past states and predictions of future states. The difference between what was, what is, and what will be creates the illusion of motion, like the way differences between film frames create the illusion of movement in a movie. If the block universe is correct, then you are not actually moving anywhere. The flow is a constructed narrative, a story your brain tells to make sense of its temporally extended existence within a static structure. You're like a character in a flipbook, each pose frozen on its page, experiencing motion only because consciousness traverses the pages sequentially. Except in a block universe, there is no external consciousness flipping the pages. The experience of motion is internal to the structure itself. This is enough to contemplate for now. The brain that generates your illusion of time is itself slowing down, its rhythms shifting towards sleep, its constructions becoming hazier and more dreamlike. The elaborate machinery that creates your sense of now is dimming its lights, preparing for the strange discontinuity of unconsciousness. But even in sleep, even in dreams, time will seem to pass. The illusion runs deep. Here it comes, the question that keeps philosophers awake at night and threatens to do the same to you if you think about it too hard. If the future already exists, if your decisions are merely discoveries of what was always going to happen, then in what sense do you have free will? In what sense are your choices genuinely yours? This is not an idle philosophical puzzle. It cuts to the heart of moral responsibility, personal identity, and the meaning of your life. If eternalism is correct, then the person you will become is already locked in place, embedded in the space-time block like a fly in amber. You're not authoring your future. You're reading a script that was written at the Big Bang, performing lines you have no power to change. The traditional debate about free will centers on determinism, the idea that every event is necessitated by prior causes according to natural laws. If the universe is deterministic, then your choices are the inevitable result of prior states, which were themselves the inevitable result of earlier states, stretching back to the beginning of time. You could not have done otherwise because the laws of physics permitted only one outcome. But eternalism adds a new dimension to this old debate. Even if the universe is not strictly deterministic, even if quantum events introduce genuine randomness, the block universe suggests that whatever happens was always going to happen in some sense. The future already exists. It has already been determined, not by prior causes, but by its simple presence in the space-time block. Some philosophers try to rescue free will through compatibilism, the view that free will is compatible with determinism as long as your choices flow from your own desires and character. When you choose chocolatey ice cream over vanilla, you're exercising free will if the choice reflects your genuine preferences and is not coerced by external forces. It does not matter that your preferences were themselves determined by prior causes. What matters is that they are your preferences, not someone else's. Compatibilism has a long and distinguished history, defended by philosophers from David Hume to Daniel Dennett. It offers a way to maintain moral responsibility in a deterministic universe by redefining what we mean by free will. You are free when you act according to your own nature, even if that nature was determined by factors beyond your control. But critics argue that compatibilism is merely a redefinition, a shell game that preserves the word free while abandoning its meaning. If your nature was determined by genetics and environment, and you had no choice about either, then in what sense are your choices really yours? You might as well praise a robot for its excellent programming. Here is an interesting historical detail. The debate about free will and determinism was already ancient when Christianity adopted it in the context of divine foreknowledge. If God knows the future perfectly, then the future is fixed, and human choices cannot alter it. Medieval theologians like Thomas Aquinas struggled mightily to reconcile divine omniscience with human freedom, proposing various solutions that echo in contemporary philosophy. The block universe replaces God with physics, but the logical structure of the problem remains eerily similar. Some thinkers embrace the hard determinism or hard incompatibilism implied by eternalism, accepting that free will is indeed an illusion and moral responsibility a useful fiction. The philosopher Galen Strawson has argued that ultimate responsibility is impossible because it would require you to have created yourself, which leads to an infinite regress. You cannot be ultimately responsible for your choices because you cannot be ultimately responsible for the character that generates those choices. This view can be liberating or terrifying depending on your temperament. If you are tortured by guilt over past mistakes, hard determinism offers absolution. You could not have done otherwise, so there is nothing to regret. But if you cherish the sense that your achievements are genuinely yours, hard determinism strips them of their glory. You are merely the conduit through which the universe expressed itself. Others argue that the whole debate is misconceived, that free will is not a metaphysical property but a psychological experience, and that experience remains valid regardless of what physics says about the structure of reality. You feel like you are making choices. You cannot help but feel this way. And perhaps that feeling is what free will actually is, not an escape from causation, but the experience of being a causally complex system that models itself and its options. This is where the discussion becomes genuinely unsettled, with reasonable people on multiple sides and no clear resolution in sight. Scholars still debate whether any version of free will is compatible with eternalism, and if so, what version? The questions are too deep to settle in a single sleepy session. What can be said is this: whatever free will is, your sense of it will not disappear because you learned about the block universe. Tomorrow you will still feel like you're choosing what to eat, what to say, how to spend your time. The illusion, if it is an illusion, is robust. It does not require metaphysical support to persist. Perhaps that is enough. Perhaps you do not need ultimate freedom to live a meaningful life. Perhaps the experience of choice is its own reward, regardless of whether the choices are scripted. The question hangs in the darkness as sleep draws nearer. You cannot decide not to think about it, because that decision too is already made. Or perhaps you can. The philosophy offers no comfort, only mysteries. But mysteries too can be a kind of comfort. You're standing at a strange crossroads now, or rather, the crossroads is standing in you, eternally embedded in the space-time block. But what if the paths could loop back on themselves? What if the future could reach into the past, creating circles of causation that have no clear beginning or end? Welcome to closed time-like curves, the physics of time travel, and the paradoxes that ensue when you take general relativity seriously in its most exotic predictions. Einstein's general theory of relativity describes gravity not as a force, but as the curvature of space-time. Massive objects bend the fabric of reality, and other objects follow the curves. This is why planets orbit stars, why light bends around galaxies, why time passes more slowly in strong gravitational fields. Space-time is not a passive backdrop, but a dynamic participant in the cosmic drama. And here is where it gets strange. The equations of general relativity permit solutions in which space-time curves so dramatically that it loops back on itself. These are closed, time-like curves, world lines that return to their own past, allowing an object to meet its earlier self, to attend its own birth, to become its own grandparent. The physicist Kurt Gödel, better known for his incompleteness theorems in mathematics, discovered one such solution in 1949. Gödel's universe is a rotating cosmological model in which closed time-like curves exist everywhere. If you lived in Gödel's universe, you could in principle travel into your own past, visit any moment in history, and return to tell the tale. Our universe does not appear to rotate in the way Gödel's model requires, so his specific solution probably does not apply. But other solutions have been found: rotating black holes, traversable wormholes, cosmic strings, that also permit closed time-like curves under certain conditions. The physics of time travel is not mere science fiction. It is a serious area of theoretical research, complete with papers in respected journals and conferences attended by sober professionals. But time travel creates paradoxes, and paradoxes make physicists nervous. The grandfather paradox is the most famous. You travel back in time and prevent your grandfather from meeting your grandmother, thereby preventing your own birth, thereby preventing you from travelling back in time, thereby allowing your grandfather to meet your grandmother after all. The loop has no consistent solution. Something has to give. Some physicists argue that closed time-like curves are simply impossible, that the equations permitting them must be modified, or that some physical mechanism prevents them from forming. Stephen Hawking proposed the chronology protection conjecture, suggesting that the laws of physics conspire to prevent time travel on macroscopic scales, perhaps through quantum effects that destabilize any would-be time machine. Others argue that the paradoxes can be resolved through self-consistency. In this view, if you travel back in time, you can only do things that are compatible with the history you already know. You might try to prevent your grandparents from meeting, but something will always stop you. You will trip. Your gun will jam. You will change your mind at the last moment. The universe enforces consistency, even if this seems to constrain your freedom in strange ways. Here is a delightful thought experiment from the philosopher David Lewis. Suppose you travel back in time to kill your grandfather, but instead you slip on a banana peel and the gun fires harmlessly into the ceiling. Did you fail because time travel constrained you, or did you slip because banana peels are slippery? The causal story can be told either way, and perhaps no paradox arises because no impossible event ever actually occurs. Scholars still debate whether self-consistency is physically enforced or merely logically required. The debate connects to deep questions about the nature of possibility, necessity, and what it means for something to be impossible. If you travel back in time, the past is already fixed, including your visit. You cannot change it because it already includes whatever you did. The apparent paradox arises from a confused way of thinking about the situation. But eternalism gives us another perspective. If the block universe is correct, then your visit to the past does not change anything. It is simply part of the block, existing timelessly alongside everything else. Your world line loops back on itself, creating a closed curve in the space-time geometry. There is no contradiction because there is no change. The block contains what it contains, and that is all. This might sound reassuring until you realize what it implies. In a block universe with closed time-like curves, the future causes the past, which causes the future, in an eternal loop with no first cause and no final effect. Causation becomes circular rather than linear. The very notion of cause and effect, so central to our understanding of the world, begins to dissolve. Perhaps the most famous fictional treatment of this idea is Robert Heinlein's story, All You Zombies, in which a character turns out to be their own mother, father and child through a series of time loops. The story is deliberately disorienting, playing with identity and causation in ways that reveal how strange the physics of closed time-like curves would really be. Whether our universe permits such loops remains unknown. The theoretical possibility exists within the equations. The practical obstacles may be insurmountable, but the mere fact that physics does not obviously forbid time travel is remarkable, a reminder that reality is far stranger than intuition suggests. You're not travelling through time loops tonight. Your world line extends forward in the usual way, from wakefulness towards sleep toward whatever dreams may come. But somewhere in the space-time block, loops may exist. Causes without beginnings, effects without ends, eternally self-consistent and eternally mysterious. The defenders of the present are mustering their forces. Not everyone accepts the frozen river, the block universe, the existence of the future already written. Presentism fights back, insisting with considerable passion that only the present moment is real, that the past has vanished, that the future does not yet exist. You might find this position comforting after all the strangeness we have traversed. Surely your intuitive sense that now is special has some merit. Surely the immediacy of this moment, the vividness of this experience indicates something metaphysically privileged about the present. Presentists argue exactly this. The reality of the past is nothing more than memories, records, and physical traces, all of which exist in the present. The reality of the future is nothing more than expectations, predictions, and tendencies, all of which also exist in the present. Strip away these present tense representations, and there is nothing left. The dinosaurs do not exist in their space-time coordinates, because space-time coordinates in the past are no more real than unicorns in fairy tales. This view has ancient roots. Aristotle himself grappled with the status of the future, famously worrying about whether it was already determined. Augustine of Hippo, writing in the 4th century, argued that past and future have no being, only the present exists, and it is a knife edge between two non-entities. The great medieval tradition of Christian philosophy generally sided with presentism, finding it compatible with divine omnipotence and the openness of the future to human choice. But presentism faces severe challenges from modern physics, challenges that make it difficult to maintain in anything like its traditional form. The problem, as we've seen, is relativity. If different observers cannot agree on what events are simultaneous, then they cannot agree on what is present. And if the present is the only thing that exists, then different observers disagree about what exists. This seems like a much more dramatic disagreement than merely differing about how to slice a loaf. Presentists have tried various maneuvers to escape this difficulty. Some argue that there is a privileged reference frame that picks out the true present, even though physics cannot detect it. This is technically possible, but strikes many as ad hoc, inventing invisible structure to save a philosophical intuition from empirical refutation. Others try to reinterpret relativity as merely about measurements and predictions rather than about fundamental reality. Perhaps the equations work regardless of what truly exists, and presentism can be maintained as a metaphysical claim compatible with empirical physics. This move has some sophisticated defenders, though it raises questions about what physics is supposed to be telling us, if not something about reality. Scholars continue to debate whether presentism can be salvaged, or whether the conflict with relativity is fatal. The discussion is technical and ongoing, with no consensus in sight. Philosophers publish papers arguing both sides, and the literature grows ever more baroque in its attempts to reconcile intuition with physics. Here is an interesting historical irony. Some of the same philosophers who defend presentism most vigorously also tend to be skeptical of scientific realism more generally. They are already inclined to think that physics does not directly describe fundamental reality, but merely provides useful predictive tools. For them, the conflict with relativity is less troubling because they never expected physics to be the final arbiter of metaphysics. But most philosophers of physics take the opposite view. If our best physical theories tell us that spacetime is a four-dimensional manifold in which all events exist, then we should probably believe it, however uncomfortable it makes us feel. Science has repeatedly overturned common sense before. The Earth orbits the Sun, matter is mostly empty space, solid objects are probability clouds, and the block universe might be just the latest example. What can be said in presentism's favour is that it aligns with conscious experience in a way that eternalism does not. You experience the present as vividly real, and the past as faded, and the future as uncertain. If metaphysics is supposed to describe reality, perhaps it should start with the data of experience rather than the abstractions of physics. But then again, experience has been wrong before. Your experience tells you that the Earth is flat, that the sun moves across the sky, that solid objects are solid. Science has taught you to distrust these impressions, to accept that reality is not as it appears. Perhaps the same lesson applies to time. The debate is not settled. The questions are genuinely open. Presentism might be correct despite the difficulties, or it might be a noble relic of pre-relativistic thinking, destined for the same dustbin as the geocentric cosmos. Either way, the conflict between physics and intuition reveals how strange our situation truly is. You exist in a universe that may or may not include your own past and future. You experience a present that may or may not be metaphysically special. You navigate your life as if the future were open, making choices that may or may not have already been made. The uncertainty is part of the human condition. It does not prevent you from living, from loving, from hoping. And it does not prevent you from sleeping as the night deepens and the debate fades into background murmur. From the depths of cosmic time, a whisper reaches you, not a whisper of sound, but of light. The cosmic microwave background radiation, the oldest light in the universe, fills every direction you might look with faint evidence of a moment almost 14 billion years ago. And this ancient glow carries subtle support for a timeless interpretation of the cosmos. When cosmologists look at the cosmic microwave background, they see a snapshot of the universe when it was roughly 380,000 years old, the moment when cooling plasma first became transparent, releasing photons that have travelled ever since across the expanding space. This light is remarkably uniform, with tiny fluctuations of only about 1 part in 100,000 marking the seeds of all future structure. Galaxies, stars, planets, you. The uniformity itself is a puzzle. How did regions of the early universe on opposite sides of the sky come to have the same temperature when they could not possibly have been in causal contact? Light travels fast, but in the 380,000 years between the Big Bang and the release of the cosmic microwave background, it did not travel far enough to connect these distant regions. They should have no way of knowing about each other, no way of coordinating their temperatures. The standard answer is cosmic inflation, a brief period of exponential expansion in the universe's first fraction of a second. Inflation stretched a tiny uniform patch of space into the entire observable universe, explaining why distant regions share the same temperature. They were once neighbours, close enough to exchange information before inflation flung them apart. Inflation is not directly proven, but it makes several predictions that have been confirmed, including the specific pattern of fluctuations in the cosmic microwave background. It is the leading paradigm in early universe cosmology, accepted by most working cosmologists, even though some alternative theories persist. Here is the connection to eternalism. Inflation suggests that the structure of the universe was set in its first instance, determined by quantum fluctuations that were stretched to cosmic scales. The seeds of galaxies, the locations of voids, the overall geometry of space. All of this was encoded in the early universe, and has been playing out ever since according to the laws of physics. If you view this through an eternalist lens, the cosmic microwave background is not just ancient light, it is a cross-section of the space-time block near its beginning, revealing the structure that determines everything that comes later. The entire history of the universe, from inflation to heat death, exists as a unified geometric object, and the microwave background shows us what the early slices look like. Scholars still debate whether this cosmological picture supports eternalism or is merely compatible with it. The physics does not force a philosophical interpretation, it merely constrains the options. But many physicists who work on relativity and cosmology find themselves drawn toward eternalism, finding it the most natural reading of the equations they use every day. Here's a quirky fact from the history of cosmology. The cosmic microwave background was discovered accidentally in 1965 by Arno Penzias and Robert Wilson, who were trying to eliminate noise from a sensitive radio antenna. They found a persistent hiss that they could not explain, coming equally from all directions. At first they thought it might be pigeon droppings on the antenna. They even cleaned the droppings away, but the signal persisted. Only after consulting with cosmologists did they realise they had detected the relic radiation from the Big Bang itself. The microwave background is not the only cosmological evidence relevant to the nature of time. The large-scale structure of the universe, the distribution of galaxies and galaxy clusters, also reflects initial conditions and the laws of physics. Computer simulations can reproduce this structure with remarkable accuracy, starting from simple initial conditions and running the equations forward. The match between simulation and observation suggests that the universe's evolution is lawful and predictable, consistent with a block universe in which the future follows from the past by necessity. But perhaps the most profound cosmological fact is the sheer scale of time itself. The universe is 13.8 billion years old. The solar system will remain habitable for perhaps another billion years before the sun grows too bright. The last stars will burn out in roughly 100 trillion years, and then comes the long, slow era of black hole evaporation, stretching across timescales so vast that our current age is effectively nothing. If eternalism is correct, all of this already exists. The first moments and the last moments are equally real, equally present in the spacetime block. You exist in a narrow slice of this vast structure, a fleeting arrangement of matter that somehow became conscious and started asking questions about its own existence. The cosmic microwave background whispers from the past, but in a block universe, it is not really past. It is simply elsewhere. The light you see when you observe it is your world line intersecting with ancient photon world lines, a geometric relationship embedded forever in the fabric of space-time. As you drift towards sleep, imagine the entire universe laid out as a single structure. Every galaxy at every moment of its evolution, every star at every stage of its life cycle, every conscious being in its brief flicker of awareness. The structure is inconceivably vast, and you are a tiny part of it, but you are a real part of it, as permanent as any other feature. The ancient light has been travelling for 13.8 billion years. In a sense, it will always be travelling, always arriving, always showing you the same primordial glow. Time is not passing for the photons. They exist in eternal transit, connecting the early universe to your retinas in a geometric relationship that knows nothing of flow. Almost a century before Einstein, another thinker assaulted our intuitions about time with arguments so strange that philosophers still puzzle over them today. John McTaggart Ellis McTaggart, yes, that was his full name, published a paper in 1908 titled The Unreality of Time, and it has been causing headaches ever since. McTaggart distinguished between two ways of thinking about time. The A-series orders events as past, present and future. The B-series orders events as earlier than or later than one another. At first, these might seem like two descriptions of the same thing, but McTaggart argued that they are fundamentally different, and that each leads to trouble. The A-series, he claimed, is essential to the passage of time. Without it, without the distinction between past, present and future, time would be nothing more than a static ordering of events, a mere B-series, like the ordering of numbers from smaller to larger. But the A-series is incoherent, McTaggart argued, because every event must have all three properties: pastness, presentness, and futurity, and yet these properties are mutually exclusive. Here is the problem. The Battle of Hastings is past, but it was once present, and before that, it was future. So it has all three A properties, but nothing can be past, present, and future simultaneously. These properties contradict each other. So how can the battle possess all three? The obvious answer is that it has them at different times. It was future in 1065, present in 1066, and past in 1067. But now we've explained the A-series by using A-series language. Past in 1065, present in 1066. We have not escaped the circle. We have just pushed it back a level. And if we try to analyse this second-order language, we encounter the same problem again, leading to an infinite regress. McTaggart concluded that time itself is unreal, that the appearance of temporal passage is somehow illusory, and that ultimate reality is timeless. This is a dramatic conclusion, and most philosophers do not follow McTaggart all the way there. But his arguments have proven remarkably difficult to dismiss, and they continue to generate new responses and reformulations more than a century later. Scholars still debate exactly what McTaggart's argument shows. Some think he successfully demonstrated that the A-series is incoherent, vindicating a B-theory of time in which earlier and later are the only genuine temporal relations and the passage of time is an illusion. Others think the regress can be stopped at some level, preserving genuine temporal becoming. Still others think McTaggart's whole framework is misconceived, and that the puzzle dissolves once we think about time more carefully. Here is an amusing historical detail. McTaggart was an idealist philosopher who believed that reality is fundamentally mental, and his denial of time's reality was part of a larger metaphysical system that few today accept. He was also a Fellow of Trinity College, Cambridge, where he influenced a generation of philosophers, including Bertrand Russell and C.D. Broad. His work on time outlived his idealism, taking on a life of its own in 20th century philosophy. The connection to eternalism is suggestive. If the A series is incoherent, if there is no genuine passage from future through present to past, then perhaps the B series is all there is. A static ordering of events, all equally real, none privileged as uniquely present. This is precisely the block universe picture that emerged independently from physics. Of course, McTaggart reached his conclusion through pure logic, without any reference to relativity or space-time geometry. The convergence between his philosophical argument and the physical picture that Einstein and Minkowski developed is striking. Two very different paths, one through metaphysical reasoning, one through empirical physics, arrive at similar destinations. But there is a difference. Physics suggests that the B series is the deeper description of reality, that the apparent A series features of experience arise from our perspective within the block. McTaggart went further, denying the reality of even the B series, arguing that time is entirely unreal. Few physicists would follow him there. The temporal dimension seems as real as the spatial dimensions in relativistic spacetime, even if passage is an illusion. The debate continues. New papers appear regularly, reinterpreting McTaggart's arguments, finding new responses, raising new puzzles. The question of whether time genuinely passes or merely appears to pass remains genuinely unsettled, with smart people on both sides and no decisive resolution in sight. What can be said is this: your experience of time passing is not self-evidently veridical. Philosophers have found coherent ways to doubt it. Physics offers reasons to think the doubt is justified. The flow of time might be the most pervasive illusion of human consciousness, a story your brain tells to make sense of a reality it was never designed to comprehend. As sleep approaches and the wind down begins, let this strangeness settle into your bones. McTaggart's puzzle will still be unsolved when you wake, and perhaps forever after. The unreality of time, if it is indeed unreal, will not prevent you from experiencing tomorrow, but it might change how you relate to that experience, how you understand your place in the cosmic story. The block universe awaits, patient and eternal. Your world line continues through it, each moment as real as every other. The past does not fade, the future does not approach. Only your experience moves, and perhaps even that movement is less than it seems. You stir in the depths of sleep, or perhaps in the shallows of wakefulness. The boundary is never as clear as you would like, and as consciousness flickers back, the philosophical puzzle that has haunted thinkers for millennia resurfaces. If nothing truly passes, if change is somehow illusory, then what is it that you experience so vividly when one moment gives way to another? This is the tension between becoming and being, the felt sense of process colliding with the static picture of eternalism. You experience life as a sequence of transformations, the cup empty, then full, then empty again. The sun rising, crossing the sky, setting, your own body aging with each passing year. But if all moments exist equally in the space-time block, then these transformations are not really happening. They are simply different cross-sections of an unchanging structure, like slices of a loaf that differ in their positions but not in their reality. The philosopher Henri Bergson spent his career trying to articulate what was wrong with this static picture. He argued that lived duration, the qualitative experience of time passing, cannot be captured by the mathematical abstractions of physics. When you wait for a pot to boil, the waiting has a texture, a felt quality, that the mere interval measured by a clock cannot express. Bergson insisted that this lived duration is more fundamental than clock time, more real than the geometrical representations of scientists. But Bergson's view has fallen out of favour among most philosophers of physics, who tend to see it as romantic obscurantism rather than serious metaphysics. The equations work. The predictions pan out. If lived duration is irreducible to mathematical description, so much the worse for lived duration. Perhaps it is merely a psychological phenomenon, not a guide to fundamental reality. And yet the question persists. Scholars still argue whether the B-series, the mere ordering of events as earlier and later, can fully capture what we mean by time, or whether something essential is lost when we abandon the A-series language of past, present and future. The debate has taken many forms over the decades, generating enough journal articles to fill a small library, with no consensus emerging. Here is a curious detail from the history of philosophy. Bergson actually debated Einstein in Paris in 1922, arguing that relativity had not truly eliminated the reality of duration. Einstein reportedly replied that there is no philosopher's time, only psychological time and physical time, and if the two differ, psychology must yield. The exchange was polite but inconclusive, and Bergson's reputation suffered in the following decades as physics went from triumph to triumph. Only recently has his work received renewed attention from philosophers trying to make sense of time consciousness. One way to reconcile becoming and being is to locate the process within the structure. Perhaps change does not require the block universe itself to change. Perhaps it is sufficient that different parts of the block have different properties. Your youth and your old age are both in the block, but they are different, just as your left hand and right hand are both in the block but are different from each other. The difference is real, only the passage from one to the other is illusory. This is a subtle distinction, and it may or may not satisfy your intuition. When you remember being young, you feel like something has been lost, like time has carried you away from that earlier self. But in a block universe, nothing has been lost. Your younger self still exists in its space-time coordinates, as vivid and real as ever. The sense of loss is a psychological artifact of how memory works, not a metaphysical fact about disappearing past. Another approach is to embrace a moving spotlight theory, which combines features of eternalism and the A-theory. On this view, all moments exist in the block, but a special property, the spotlight of the present, moves through the block, conferring reality or special vividness on each moment as it passes. This preserves the intuition that now is special while also accepting the existence of past and future. But the moving spotlight raises its own puzzles. What moves the spotlight? How fast does it move? This question is not well defined, because velocity requires a reference against which to measure motion, and there is no reference outside of time. Most philosophers find the moving spotlight more trouble than it is worth, adding epicycles to a picture that was doing fine without them. Perhaps the deepest response is to accept that experience and reality can come apart. You experience time passing. This experience is itself a fact about the world. It is part of the content of your mental states. But the fact that you experience time passing does not mean that time actually passes. You experience the sun moving across the sky, but the sun is not really moving. The earth is rotating. Experience is evidence, but it is not infallible evidence. It can be corrected by theory. If the block universe is correct, then your sense of becoming is like the sun's apparent motion, a reliable appearance that does not track the underlying reality. You will never stop experiencing time as passing, just as you will never stop experiencing the sun as moving. But you can learn to hold this experience lightly, to recognize it as a feature of your perspective rather than the final truth about the cosmos. The tension between becoming and being is ancient, perhaps as old as philosophy itself. It will not be resolved tonight. But simply naming it, simply noticing the gap between what you experience and what physics suggests, is itself a kind of progress. Something disturbing lurks in the logical depths of an eternal universe, an argument so strange that many physicists wish it would go away. If the universe exists for infinite time, or if infinitely many observers can exist across cosmic history, then most of the conscious beings who will ever exist are probably not biological creatures like you. They are Boltzmann brains, spontaneous fluctuations of consciousness arising from random thermal motions in the distant future. This requires some explanation. Remember Boltzmann's statistical mechanics, the framework that explains entropy in terms of the arrangement of microscopic particles. In that framework, any configuration of particles that is physically possible will eventually occur given enough time. A cup of coffee at room temperature is constantly undergoing random molecular fluctuations. Most of these fluctuations are tiny, invisible, uninteresting. But occasionally, purely by chance, a larger fluctuation will occur. Perhaps a few molecules will cluster together in an unusual way. Given infinite time, there is no limit to how large these fluctuations can be. Eventually, by sheer chance, a fluctuation will produce a working brain, complete with false memories and a sense of continuous experience. This brain will exist only momentarily before dissolving back into chaos, but during its brief existence it will be conscious. It will believe it has a past and expect a future. It will be as convinced of its reality as you are of yours. Here is the troubling part. In an eternal universe, these spontaneous brains vastly outnumber brains that evolved through normal biological processes. The chance of a Boltzmann brain fluctuating into existence is minuscule on any short time scale, but the amount of time available is literally infinite. Multiply a tiny probability by an infinite amount of time, and you get infinitely many Boltzmann brains. Meanwhile, the number of ordinary biological brains is presumably finite. There are only so many planets, so many opportunities for life, before the stars burn out. This leads to a bizarre conclusion. If you are a randomly chosen conscious observer in an eternal universe, you're almost certainly a Boltzmann brain rather than a biological one. Your memories are probably false, your sense of continuity is probably an illusion, and you will probably dissolve into chaos within moments of having this thought. But you have not dissolved. You're still reading. This seems like evidence that you're not a Boltzmann brain. Or is it? A Boltzmann brain would have exactly the same experiences you're having right now, at least until the fluctuation ends. There is no way to distinguish between being a real observer and being a momentary fluke with false memories. Scholars have proposed various escapes from this predicament. One is to deny that the universe will exist forever. Perhaps it will end in a big crunch, or a phase transition that eliminates the conditions for Boltzmann brains. Another is to argue that only certain kinds of observers count for probabilistic reasoning, excluding Boltzmann brains on methodological grounds. Still another is to accept the conclusion and live with it, acknowledging that your confidence in your own reality is ultimately groundless. Here is a quirky historical note. The physicist Ludwig Boltzmann himself may have contemplated a version of this argument. In 1895, he suggested that the universe might be in an extremely improbable low-entropy fluctuation, and that we exist because we are part of that fluctuation. This anticipates some features of the modern Boltzmann brain problem, though Boltzmann did not develop the argument in its current disturbing form. The connection to eternalism is this. If all moments of time exist equally, then all Boltzmann brains that will ever fluctuate into existence already exist. They are embedded in the space-time block just as you are. Their experiences are as real as yours, and there are more of them, much more. This might seem like a decisive argument against eternalism, but it is not clear that the alternative helps. Even in a presentist universe where only the present moment exists, the problem remains. If the present moment will eventually contain a Boltzmann brain, then that brain will be real at that time. The question is not about which moments exist, but about how to count observers and make probabilistic inferences about your own identity. Some physicists argue that the Boltzmann brain problem reveals a deep flaw in our cosmological models. A good theory, they suggest, should not predict that most observers are momentary fluctuations. If our current theories make this prediction, then perhaps the theories are wrong, and the correct theory of cosmology will avoid the problem. This is an area of active research with no clear resolution. The Boltzmann brain problem is a symptom of how strange our universe becomes when we take infinity seriously. It is a reminder that the questions we are exploring tonight are not merely philosophical curiosities. They connect to cutting-edge physics and might eventually have empirical implications. For now, you can provisionally assume that you are not a Boltzmann brain. Your memories feel connected to a continuous history. Your experiences feel embedded in a coherent world, and the alternative is too paralyzing to contemplate. But the possibility remains, lurking at the edge of reason, a reminder of how uncertain our deepest assumptions actually are. At the bleeding edge of theoretical physics, something remarkable is happening. Time might be disappearing entirely, not illusory in the sense of flowing when it does not, but genuinely absent from the fundamental description of reality. Loop quantum gravity, one of the leading approaches to quantum gravity, suggests that time is not a basic feature of the universe, but an emergent property that arises from more fundamental structures. This is a startling claim, and it requires some context. For over a century, physicists have struggled to combine general relativity, which describes gravity as spacetime curvature, with quantum mechanics, which describes the other fundamental forces. These two theories are wildly successful in their respective domains, but seem to speak different languages. General relativity is smooth and continuous. Quantum mechanics is discrete and probabilistic. Combining them has proven extraordinarily difficult. Loop quantum gravity is one attempted solution. It suggests that spacetime itself has a discrete granular structure at the smallest scales, not smooth, but woven from tiny loops of quantum geometry. Just as a fabric appears continuous from a distance but is actually made of individual threads, spacetime appears continuous at large scales, but is made of discrete quantum units at the Planck scale, roughly 10 to the negative 35th meters. And here is where time gets strange. In the fundamental equations of loop quantum gravity, there is no time variable. The equations describe relationships between quantum states of geometry, but they do not include any parameter that corresponds to the flow of time. Time, in this framework, is not something the universe does. It is something the universe contains, an appearance that emerges from the correlations between different quantum states. This idea, sometimes called timelessness or the frozen formalism, has a history predating loop quantum gravity. It traces back to the Wheeler-DeWitt equation, formulated in the 1960s as an attempt to combine quantum mechanics with general relativity. The Wheeler-DeWitt equation describes the quantum state of the entire universe, and famously, it contains no time variable. The universe, according to this equation, simply is, it does not evolve. But if there is no fundamental time, how do we explain our experience of things happening, of change, of before and after? This is the problem of time in quantum gravity, and it has generated decades of research and debate. One approach is to identify time with correlations between different parts of the universe. A clock is just a physical system that correlates with other physical systems in a regular way. When you look at your watch and see that it reads noon, you're noticing a correlation between the quantum state of the watch and the quantum state of your brain. Neither is more fundamental than the other. Neither is really telling you what time it is. There is no what time it is, only correlations. Scholars still debate whether this relational approach to time is coherent and whether it can fully recover the time-ordered experience we take for granted. Some argue that it dissolves the mystery of time by showing how temporal appearances can emerge from timeless fundamentals. Others argue that it merely relocates the mystery, pushing the problem of time into the problem of correlations without solving anything. Here is a fascinating detail from the history of this research. The physicist Julian Barber has developed a particularly radical version of timelessness, arguing in his book The End of Time that the universe is a static ensemble of instantaneous configurations called nows. There is no flow from one now to the next. All nows simply exist, and the appearance of time arises from the structure of the configuration space and the correlations between nows. Barber's view is controversial, but has attracted significant attention for its boldness and clarity. If loop quantum gravity or a similar approach turns out to be correct, then the block universe picture we have been exploring might be merely an approximation, valid at large scales but misleading at the fundamental level. The space-time block would emerge from something deeper, a quantum foam or spin network or configuration space that has no intrinsic temporal structure. This would be a strange kind of vindication for eternalism. Not only does time not flow, as the block universe suggests, but time might not even exist as a fundamental dimension. The ultimate structure of reality might be genuinely timeless, with space-time and its apparent flow arising only at larger scales, like how wetness arises from molecules that are individually dry. We do not yet know if this is true. Loop quantum gravity and its competitors remain speculative, unconfirmed by experiment. The energies required to probe Planck-scale physics are far beyond any technology we possess or can envision. But the theoretical possibility that time might dissolve entirely is remarkable, a reminder of how provisional our current understanding truly is. Tonight, as you rest in your ordinary time-bound experience, the fundamental nature of that experience remains deeply uncertain. Perhaps time flows. Perhaps time exists but does not flow. Perhaps time does not even exist, and your entire experience is a higher-level pattern in a fundamentally timeless structure. The mysteries run deeper than you suspected. The journey continues. Let us turn now to something more intimate, something that touches every conscious being who has ever contemplated the passage of time. What does eternalism mean for death? If your life is a permanent structure embedded in the space-time block, never truly beginning, never truly ending, then in what sense do you cease to exist when you die? This is not an abstract question for you. You will die. That much is certain, regardless of any advances in medicine or technology that might extend your lifespan. At some point, your biological processes will cease. Your brain will stop generating consciousness, and you will no longer experience anything. This is the fate that awaits you, that awaits everyone you love, that has already arrived for countless beings throughout cosmic history. In the conventional view of time, death is an ending. The future stretches out before you, a dwindling resource, and death marks the point where your share of it runs out. You will have no more experiences, no more thoughts, no more anything. The universe will continue without you, indifferent to your absence. But if eternalism is correct, this picture changes in subtle but significant ways. Your death is not an ending but a boundary. Your world line has a finite extent in the temporal direction, just as your body has a finite extent in the spatial directions. When you die, you do not cease to exist. You simply do not extend beyond that temporal coordinate. The moments of your life remain in the block, as real as they ever were, as real as they will ever be. Consider what this means. Your happiest memories are not fading photographs but eternal monuments. The love you feel for others is inscribed in space-time forever. The experiences you cherish will never stop existing, will never be erased by the passage of time, because time does not pass and nothing can be erased from the block. The philosopher Julian Barber, whose radical timelessness we mentioned earlier, has drawn consolation from this picture. Perhaps the best way to think of death, he writes, is not as an ending but as a boundary. You are a finite structure, and finite structures have boundaries. But boundaries are not annihilations, they are simply edges. Here is a historical aside that may offer further comfort. Many ancient philosophers came to similar conclusions through very different reasoning. The Stoics, for example, taught that death is not to be feared because it is simply the return to the state of non-existence that preceded birth. Marcus Aurelius urged acceptance of mortality as natural, a return to the elements from which we emerged. These Stoic attitudes resonate with eternalism, though they were developed without benefit of modern physics. But there is a darker side to this picture. If all moments exist equally, then your suffering also exists eternally. Every pain you have ever felt, every grief, every fear, remains embedded in the space-time block. Healing is not really healing. It is merely the fact that later moments of your world line contain less suffering than earlier ones. The suffering itself never goes away. Scholars have grappled with this troubling implication. Some argue that the eternalist picture simply describes what is the case, without implying any particular attitude toward it. The suffering exists, yes, but you do not have to feel bad about its existence. You can instead focus on the parts of your world line that contain joy and meaning. Others argue that the eternalist picture should change how we understand the goal of ethics. Rather than minimizing suffering across time, perhaps we should focus on maximizing the good parts of the space-time block, creating regions of joy and flourishing that will exist eternally. There is no consensus on how to live in light of eternalism. The philosophical implications are still being worked out. But what can be said is this: the block universe does not make your life meaningless. If anything, it makes it more meaningful. Every moment of your existence is permanent, a fixed fact about reality that can never be undone. You matter. Your experiences matter. The love you give and receive matters. All of it is woven into the fabric of the cosmos, eternal and unchanging, a part of the universe's story that nothing can erase. As sleep draws near, let this thought be a comfort. You're not a flame that will gutter out. You're a shape carved in eternity, a pattern in the block universe, as permanent as the stars, more permanent in fact because stars burn out while the block endures. Your death will come, but it will be a boundary, not an ending, and the moments of your life will remain, glowing in their coordinates, forever. The specious present. What a wonderful phrase, full of antiquated charm and psychological precision. William James coined it in 1890 to describe that curious thickness of the moment, the sense that now has duration rather than being an infinitesimal point. And as you drift towards sleep, this stretchy quality of the present becomes ever more apparent, the boundaries between moments softening like wax near a flame. James described the specious present as the short duration of which we are immediately and incessantly sensible. It is not a mathematical instant but an experienced interval, typically lasting 2 to 3 seconds, within which events feel like they are happening together rather than in sequence. Listen to a short melody. The notes do not feel like isolated points, but as parts of a unified present experience. The first note is still with you as the last note sounds. They coexist in the specious present. This might seem like a minor psychological curiosity, but it has implications for our understanding of time and consciousness. If your experience of now has duration, then you're experiencing multiple moments simultaneously. In a block universe, this means you're spread across several slices of space-time at once, your consciousness extending along your world line rather than occupying a single point. Some philosophers have seized on this as a problem for eternalism. If all moments exist equally, why do you experience a specific range of them as present rather than some other range? What picks out your specious present from the vast array of moments in the block? One answer is that the specious present is simply how consciousness works. It is a feature of the brain's processing rather than a feature of time itself. Your neural machinery integrates information over a short interval, and this integration produces the feeling of a unified present. Different brains might have different specious presents, just as different organisms might have different perceptual systems. Here is an intriguing finding from neuroscience. The duration of the specious present seems to vary with attention and arousal. When you are focused and alert, the present feels crisp and short. When you're tired or dreamy, the present stretches, becoming softer and more diffuse. This variation suggests that the specious present is constructed rather than discovered, a product of brain activity rather than a direct perception of temporal reality. Scholars still debate exactly how the specious present is implemented in the brain. Some propose that it involves working memory, the system that holds information active for short periods. Others suggest it involves temporal binding mechanisms, the processes that link together events that occur close in time. The details remain unclear, but the broad picture is that your brain creates the present through active processing rather than passive reception. Edmund Husserl, the founder of phenomenology, developed an entire theory of time consciousness based on the structure of the specious present. He distinguished between retention, the fading awareness of the just past, and protension, the anticipation of the about to come. The living present for Husserl includes both of these, a thick moment encompassing memory and expectation, as well as immediate sensation. This phenomenological approach has influenced many philosophers who study time, though it remains controversial whether it tells us anything about time itself or merely about how we experience it. The block universe does not care about your retention and pretension. It simply contains all moments equally. But your consciousness cares deeply, weaving them together into the felt experience of now. Here is a quirky fact from the research literature. Musicians seem to have slightly different specious presence than non-musicians, presumably because their training has altered the temporal processing in their brains. This suggests that the specious present is plastic, capable of being shaped by experience and practice. Your sense of now is not fixed, but can change over your lifetime. As you sink towards sleep, notice how your specious present is changing. The crisp edges of waking awareness are softening. Moments that would normally feel sequential are beginning to blur together. The present is stretching, becoming a wider window that encompasses more of your world line. In dreams, the specious present behaves even more strangely. Time can seem to skip forward or backward. Hours can pass in what feels like minutes, and the normal rules of temporal experience break down entirely. This suggests that the specious present is fundamentally a waking phenomenon, maintained by neural processes that sleep disrupts. But even in sleep, even in dreams, some sense of now persists. You experience dream events as present, even if the present has become distorted and surreal. Consciousness continues to construct its moment, however poorly, until deep dreamless sleep dissolves the construction entirely. The specious present is perhaps 3 seconds long, but your whole life is embedded in the block. Your consciousness slides along your world line, constructing now after now, each lasting a few seconds, each giving way to the next. The construction is seamless when you're awake, ragged when you're tired, and absent when you are deeply asleep. You're approaching that absence now. The specious present is thinning, fading, preparing to disappear into unconsciousness. Let it go. The block will hold you. If the future already exists, if your choices are discoveries rather than creations, if your death is a boundary rather than an ending, then what is the point of it all? How can you live meaningfully in a universe where everything is already determined, already inscribed in the eternal structure of space-time? This is perhaps the most pressing question we have approached tonight, and it deserves a careful answer. Meaninglessness is a threat that looms over every deterministic picture of the universe, every view that seems to reduce human agency to mere mechanism. If you are a puppet whose strings were pulled at the Big Bang, why bother doing anything at all? But this despair rests on a confusion. Meaning does not require the ability to change the future. It requires engagement with reality, connection to others, and the experience of value. These things remain possible in a block universe. They are not diminished by eternalism. They are, if anything, enhanced by it. Consider, every kind act you perform is eternal. Every moment of love you share is inscribed forever in space-time. Every piece of beauty you create or appreciate exists permanently in the block, immune to the entropy that will eventually erase all physical traces. Your life is not a sandcastle awaiting the tide. It is a sculpture in the medium of reality itself. The philosopher Ted Sider has argued that eternalism should actually increase our sense of value rather than diminish it. In a presentist universe, everything is eventually destroyed. The past ceases to exist, taking all value with it. In an eternalist universe, nothing is ever truly lost. The good things remain, even after you stop experiencing them. This might not eliminate all existential anxiety, but it offers a different relationship to impermanence. When someone you love dies, they are not erased. They persist in their region of the block as real as ever. When a beautiful moment ends, it doesn't vanish. It remains at its coordinates, eternal and unchanged. Loss is not absolute loss. It is merely distance in the temporal direction. Here is a thought experiment that might help. Imagine you're looking at a beautiful landscape painting. The right edge of the painting is no worse than the left edge, just because you encounter it later as your eye moves across the canvas. Both edges exist equally. Both are part of the painting's value. Now imagine your life as a temporal painting, with earlier moments on one edge and later moments on the other. The ending of your life is no worse than the beginning, just as the right edge of the painting is no worse than the left. All of it exists. All of it contributes to the whole. This analogy is not perfect. You experience your life sequentially, not all at once. But it suggests a way of relating to mortality that does not depend on endless continuation. A finite life can be complete, just as a finite painting can be complete. What matters is not duration but content. Scholars have explored various ethical frameworks compatible with eternalism. Some argue for maximizing the total amount of value in the space-time block, creating the best possible four-dimensional structure. Others focus on individual lives, treating each world line as a unity to be evaluated as a whole rather than moment by moment. Still others emphasize the relationships between lives, the ways that individual world lines interweave to create larger structures of meaning and value. Here is a practical suggestion for living meaningfully in a block universe. Focus on the present moment. Not because the present is metaphysically special, eternalism denies that, but because the present is where your agency is located, where your experience is most vivid, where your capacity for attention and appreciation is fully engaged. The past exists, but you cannot change it. The future exists, but you cannot skip to it. The present is where you are, and attending to it fully is perhaps the best way to live. This is not so different from advice found in many spiritual traditions. Buddhism encourages mindfulness, the practice of attending fully to the present moment. Stoicism urges acceptance of what cannot be changed and focus on what lies within your control. These ancient teachings were developed without knowledge of the block universe, but they resonate with its implications. You cannot change the fact that everything is already determined, but you can change how you relate to that fact, or rather, the way you relate to that fact is itself part of the block, and you are currently experiencing the moment where that relationship is being shaped. This moment is as real as any other. Make it count. The block universe does not diminish your life, it eternizes it. Every struggle, every triumph, every ordinary Tuesday afternoon, all of it is woven permanently into the fabric of reality. You're not a passing shadow. You're a permanent feature of the cosmos, as lasting as the stars. And so we arrive at the end of this night's journey, though in a block universe there are no endings, only boundaries. The questions we have explored will remain open, will continue to generate debate and speculation, will perhaps never be resolved to everyone's satisfaction. But you have travelled far, and the travelling itself has value, regardless of the destination. Eternalism asks you to accept something deeply counterintuitive, that the future exists just as surely as the past, that the flow of time is an illusion, that your life is a four-dimensional sculpture rather than a three-dimensional process. This is strange, perhaps unsettling, but it is also strangely beautiful. It means you're not a flickering flame, but a permanent pattern, not a passing shadow, but a fixed star. The physicists and philosophers have done their best to illuminate this picture. Einstein showed us that simultaneity is relative, that now has no privileged status. Minkowski gave us the geometry of spacetime, the four-dimensional manifold where all events exist together. Boltzmann explained why the arrow of time points in one direction, even though the laws of physics work equally well in both. McTaggart argued that temporal passage is incoherent. The quantum physicists complicated everything, raising puzzles about determinism and probability that remain unresolved. And through it all, your brain continued to construct the illusion of a flowing present, an advancing now, a future that approaches and becomes present and recedes into the past. This illusion is robust. It will not disappear because you have learned about the block universe. Tomorrow morning you will still feel like time is passing, like the future is open, like your choices matter. Perhaps they do matter in some sense. Perhaps the eternalist picture does not eliminate agency but relocates it. Your choices are part of the block, part of the causal structure that determines how the future relates to the past. You're not outside the system, able to change it from without. You're inside the system, part of its unfolding, contributing to its shape. Here is a final piece of consolation to carry with you into sleep. The block universe means that love is eternal. Every moment of connection, every experience of closeness, every act of care and kindness, all of it exists forever, inscribed in the space-time structure that no entropy can erode. The people you have loved are not lost to the past. They persist in their regions of the block, as real and as present in some sense as you are now. The Stoics understood this, in their own way. Marcus Aurelius wrote of returning to the elements, of accepting mortality as natural, of finding peace in the cosmic order. The eternalist picture offers a different route to the same peace. You do not return to the elements. You never left them. You are part of the cosmos, have always been part of it, will always be part of it. Your death is not an escape from the block, but a feature of your shape within it. As you close your eyes and let the night take you, let go of the anxieties that accompany temporal thinking. Let go of the regrets about the past. It exists, unchanged, and cannot be harmed by your remorse. Let go of the fears about the future. It exists already determined and cannot be altered by your worry. What remains is this moment, this breath, this experience of drifting toward unconsciousness. The block universe holds you. It has always held you. It will always hold you. You are safe in its eternal embrace, a permanent feature of reality, never truly born and never truly dying, simply existing across all the coordinates that make up your world line. The journey ends here, at this boundary. But boundaries are not endings. They are simply edges, the places where one thing becomes another, the contours that define a shape. Your life is a shape in the block, and it is complete now, even as you continue to experience its later moments. Rest well, dream sweetly, and know that every moment of your existence persists forever in the frozen river of space-time. The darkness deepens now, warm and welcoming, softer than velvet, gentler than a whisper. The grand ideas we have traversed, the block universe, the relativity of simultaneity, the strange loops of time and consciousness. They fade like stars at dawn, not disappearing but simply receding from attention, making room for something simpler. You need not hold on to any of it. The universe will continue its eternal existence whether you remember or forget. The space-time block will preserve every moment, including this one, where you finally release the effort of thinking and allow yourself simply to be. Feel the weight of your body sinking, settling, merging with the warmth beneath you. Notice the rhythm of your breath, slowing now, deepening, becoming as steady and unhurried as the rotation of galaxies. The room around you fades, its edges blurring, its details softening into something dreamlike. You have travelled far tonight, through ideas that stretch the mind and challenge intuition. But the travelling is done now. The destination was never the point. The journey itself was the gift, and you have received it. Now rest. In the block universe, you're always here, always at peace, always drifting toward this gentle sleep. The moment is eternal. The comfort is permanent. Nothing can take it from you, because nothing can reach into the block and erase what exists. Let go. Let the frozen river carry you. Let the eternal embrace hold you close. Sweet dreams. You are safe. You are eternal. You are home.